So this number will set you free. I'm not going to hide it. The number's 3. Didn't mean for that to rhyme. Sorry. Oh my God, this is turning into poetry. Enough of that. All right, so the number is 3, and it's not a rule. It's not a magic thing. We're going to hear later from Charlie Pickard, who's a really, really good life drawing teacher, why this is a useful number for us as artists. But just to get across the point to you, here are some examples. So for example, let's say you want to be able to create nice flowing lines. You want your lines to improve. A really useful principle is to stick to C-shaped curves, S-shaped curves, and straight lines. This idea has been so powerful for me in my own drawing. So if we go into this quick sketch, this quick gestural drawing, here's a straight line, here's an S-shaped curve, here's another straight line. For here, I used another S-shaped curve. Here is, a C-shaped curve, and so on. So if I ever go beyond the S-shaped curve, it will probably be okay. It's not a rule, right? It's not a rule, but it's just a little thing that I keep in my mind to keep me on the right path. And it's really simple because it comes down to just 3 ideas.
I think it's actually a lot more to do with how we understand complex things as human beings.
Okay.
So like, if you think about it, right? If someone gives you a number for their phone or whatever, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but you don't go 0795867.
Yeah.
You don't remember it like that. You go
No.
079 355 650.
That's true.
That's what people do.
It's true.
Yeah. So I think that's why.
I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
Or like when they say, okay, if you want to make a presentation, 3 points.
Yeah.
Have 3 points and have a structure of 3. And then stories, you'll have 3 acts.
Yeah. And I think it's really fundamental to how.
I guess so. It's more about us than an inherent thing about the universe.
Yeah.
It's just that we will understand the image.
Yeah, I think it's the human mind. So like one of the ways I teach it with values, for example, because I think when people come into my classes, a lot of times they feel like they've got to like observe perfectly. And one of the things I tell people when they start is, don't worry about that. Just give yourself 3 options and mix those 3 options and start with that. And mentally reduce what's in front of you to that.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I think, more a way we are able to understand complex things.
Is break it into 3s.
Yeah.
2 extremes in the middle.
Yeah, because I think that's the simplest. I think it's the simplest a complex thing can be.
That's really cool.
It's
true.
So, and still maintain complexity. So like light and dark is a good explanation of values, but it doesn't really, represent everything. Whereas light, dark, middle starts to feel like, there's a semblance of something here.
The lit side, the dark side, and the transition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's just how we experience the world. It's like 3 things is when you start to understand. I mean, they even say with geometry, 3 sides is where shapes begin.
That's cool. And actually, the way that we ask people to start to simplify the figure is head, ribcage, pelvis. 3 forms.
Always 3.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's interesting.
Another principle is big, medium, small, which helps you to relate your shapes nicely together. So you go for some big shapes, some medium-sized shapes, and then, smaller shapes. So it's a principle that's based on 3 ideas, and you're just trying to balance these 3. And it's not a rule, but it's just a nice rule of thumb to keep in mind.
In the Richard Schmid book, he talks about, you start with 3, at max 5 values. And I remember when I started copying paintings that way, you start to realize, that's how they actually thought about it. They weren't doing all of this. And I'm convinced the reason for that is if you picture like a collection of objects, like here, you can look at it, you don't have to count. There's 3 objects, right? But if I added 5 more objects, you'd just be like, it's a bit of a mess. Like over there, there's some number. You could figure it out, but it just looks like stuff. Does that make sense?
It does.
And
you can instantly interpret 3s.
Yeah, and I think that's, what we're trying to represent is complexity in nature, with realism at least. But we're trying to represent it in a way that's understandable. And past 5, it's just a mess. That's all, that is just a bunch of stuff. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, man.
And so that to me is what's so interesting about that as an organizational principle. So I always think, you know, whenever you deal with anything in the arts, try to simplify it into 3, and then if you want to get more complex, simplify it into 5. But you probably aren't going to go beyond that.
And you're getting into tricky waters with 5.
Yeah,
as soon as you start getting to 5, you're getting hard. It's getting hard.
It's already difficult.
So color mixing. Color mixing seems super complicated, infinite range of colors. All you're trying to do though is manage 3 characteristics. The hue, you know, is it warm or cool color? The value, how light or dark is it? And then the saturation level. You're going to keep it highly saturated or not so saturated. So suddenly color mixing, you're just trying to manage 3 things. Way more doable.
It's a general idea, but I find it personally very useful.
It's quite reassuring. It's quite relaxing, right? Because you're like, I don't need to be able to handle anything more than 3 ideas at a time.
Yeah. And then you can, and I mean, another analogy I use is like if you're with values, at least, because it's also how you're dealing with an audience, you know. Because all of art, we don't necessarily think of it that way all the time when you're starting to learn, but the more you do it, the more it becomes a conversation with an audience. So like, you know, why we do certain things is because it works for an audience, and it's not necessarily taught that way, but I think it's a very useful way to think of picture making.
Yeah.
So, you know, why 3 values? Well, what you're doing is you're giving your audience 3 options to look at.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're saying there are 3 things happening in front of you, and that's your like visual feast. So I don't know if you've ever been to like a really cheap restaurant and they'll have like 100 items on the menu, and you're like, I don't even know what to pick. I don't want to look at this even.
Yeah.
But like a really high fancy place would only have a few, you know, a couple options, and it's the same idea.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, completely different. You're going into a character design. You're trying to think, what kind of shapes do I want to use for this character? You just kind of need to manage and balance 3 types of shape. A circular shape, square shapes, and triangular shapes. Each one has a different feel. We can get into this. Planning to do some more character design things later on. But the point is that all you're really having to do is manage these 3 types, these 3 characters of shape. And then another one, which is interesting, is the type of edge. So Charlie really emphasizes when you're rendering sharp edges versus incredibly soft edges, and then firm edges. So incredibly soft edges are the transitions in value that are so gentle, it's hard to see where that transition's happened. Whereas sharp edges is like a line. And then the firm edge is a softer transition, but it's a bit clearer where that transition's happening. So it's about figuring out the 3 things that you care about and then just trying to toggle and balance between them. Let me know any more areas of art that you think come down to 3. I'm just thinking, even in landscapes, it's foreground, middle ground, background. Just trying to balance these 3 things, no matter what the topic, it makes it easier for us to implement. And also it makes it easier for the viewer to take in and understand the image and relate to the image without having to think about it, just feel it. So it's a really, really powerful rule of thumb. If you'd like to learn more from Charlie, and in particular those 3 edge types that we talked about earlier in the video, how to create those with charcoal and then how to apply those, how to use those, for example, to create a sphere, and then how to use them on a figure, he's made an incredible workshop for us in our study group. You can also, in the study group, learn about the other ideas that we talked about around shape design, around all kinds of different ways to create beautiful lines, CSI lines and things like that. And if you're ever in London or you have the opportunity, come and check out Charlie's studio. He's a really brilliant artist, but also he's a fantastic teacher. Right now, he has classes on different days of the week, depending on what you want to learn. So also, you can check out his Instagram, and he's got some books out as well. So like this one on color and light. And like I said, for online learning, come and check out our study group. We have courses covering all the big skills of figure drawing. They're really, really powerful. And for right now, there should be another video up on the screen chosen just for you. So check it out, and I'll see you over there.